Okay, so we are at a point right now where I would like to check how this is looking in World Runner before we continue on. We've been through the geometry tab. You've made collision meshes and world meshes. We've done billboarding. You can turn any of these meshes into a clickable button using a stepped animation chain, and you can look in the animation chain section or stepped animation section for a detailed video on how those work. But right now, we've done a decent amount of work, and we should export this and see what it looks like file size-wise and inside of Nowhere, material-wise and everything else, maybe even scale-wise, right? So let's go ahead and click the Export GLTF button. I actually just had a Python fail because I went ahead and changed the name of my directory that I was building in. So when you do that, you're going to have to go back and reselect your export folder because I ended up changing the name of mine. So if I go ahead and click Export World and give it a second, I'm not going to get a Python error this time, and we have export complete. And we can go to that export folder, which we have in the Artistic Foods folder, and we can see what we got here. So it looks like we have a very low amount of textures, which is great, right? A total of 16, including these two, so 14 textures really that were added to our world. Fantastic numbers. But we also see that we're at around 40 megabytes, which is pushing it. But we have, let's see, 33 megabytes of textures, which is great because we only have a 6.76 megabyte GLTF file, which is exactly what we're looking for. And in line with being compatible for both mobile and desktop, which is fantastic. So we're looking decent here. And we can definitely bring down the file size of some of these textures. That shouldn't be a problem. We'll figure that out when it comes to it. We'll just have to compress some of these. But we also want to make sure this is running fine in World Runner. So if we just go to our World Runner install and we go ahead and open up World Runner, we can load this world that we just exported. It's going to ask you to load in the world. Just go to Artistic Food, Export, and load in the GLTF world. We can make this full screen for you guys, and we can just take a look at how this is going to look inside the Nowhere platform. And we can see if those materials that we were messing with earlier are going to end up working, because I have a feeling those nodes aren't going to transfer over through GLTF, and we're going to have to change it to a compatible material type ourselves. We'll just give it a second to load in. And yeah, so we can see there are some slight issues here with our file. The emission on this base of the table is way too high. That's why it's glowing like this. So this is something you should totally change. You also see all of these black parts of it's supposed to be an alpha, but we're not getting that alpha to shine through, and that is because it is not using a GLTF compatible shader node. It's using all those weird mix shaders that I wasn't sure was going to work. But it looks like the banana looks good, as well as the plate over here. We can check and make sure our nav meshes are in the right space, which they are, but our scale seems maybe a little too small. I want to be able to walk underneath that watermelon and have a conversation. We can check out Club Tomato over here, and I want to be able to have multiple people in this club. It looks, again, a little too small. We might want to bump the size of this up quite a bit, actually. One thing to note right now that these screen entities are coming in as squares right here in World, but when you go to broadcast your screen, it'll be broadcast in the dimension that your screen is. So we see that the eggs look like they're in pretty good shape. The eggplant is sort of cool, but you have a lot of this way too much emission, again, unless we like this look. It's sort of cool. It's a cool look, I'm not going to lie. Maybe we'll leave it for that. Or just tone it down a bit. But we can very clearly tell that these materials need to be converted to a PBR shader type. So let's just go back to Blender real quick and tackle some of these issues that we've been seeing. The first one is going to be if we click on this, which is supposed to have alpha on it, and we go over to our shading tab. It has all these complex mix shaders and different like nodes that are not going to be exported to GLTF. So if we go ahead and we take our base color, we just disconnect the color, we disconnect the alpha, and we change this over to a principled BSDF. We can take our color to our color. We can take our alpha to our alpha. We can take our color to our emission. Let's pull down our emission strikes to 0.1. And let's make our alpha a alpha blend. And that should look a lot better in that regard. It seems that these are all using the same material. Fantastic. So that's going to be what we want. We also going to want to probably change this one. It doesn't have the transparency on it, so it's working fine, but there's no need to have all of this. Let's just go ahead, rip it out, make it a background shader. So it looks like everything else. Check everything else. It looks good, looks good, looks good. T-pop glass base color. Looks like they're all sharing the same material, which is great. Over here, I'd like to go to the teapot glass base color and check it out. Cool, it definitely is sharing them all. Table base color is a different one. Sweet, right there. Looking good as well. So we're going to want to make sure that is also going to be a 0.1 on the emissive aspect, just to tone that down a big notch. Over here, let's do the same thing. Let's pull this down to a 0.1, tone that down a bit. Maybe we want to pull this up a bunch so we can get like a 10 on the emission over here for Club Tomato, make that shine a little more. And let's go ahead, and I think that may do it for our different shaders. Those are cool, working good, looking good. That might be good for our shaders. So let's go back to our layout tab. And we are going to scale everything up a little bit because it seemed like everything is just a little like out of scale. So let's just make sure we have our collision on. Let's make sure we have our entities on. Select everything and scale it up by 3. We'll select everything except our player spawn, actually. Which is right here. And we're going to not unselect it by control selecting. God damn it. We're going to select everything and we're going to unselect it just by going into our entity section, unselecting the cone. So we don't want that to scale because that's going to keep our players to scale. We want to scale everything else by a factor of 3. Let's go 3. And then let's take this, bring it over here, bring it over here, bring it over here. Pull that down, pull that over here, pull that over here, boom, whatever, rotate it. Looking good, so let's save that now. I hate starting at 1, so let's start at 0. Housekeeping. Then let's do another export. All right, so export complete. Let's go back here. Let's file, reload the scene. All right. Here we go. Now this is a lot better. We have the alpha looking correct. We may potentially have some weird artifacting going on, but it looks pretty good, I think. The emission is way down. We can go back and turn that emission up if we wanted. But you can see the difference clearly now between the background shader and a PBR shader, right? Like that's a PBR shader, that's a background shader, and it's not affected by light versus it is being affected by light. You can see I also made a little bit of an oversight when scaling all of this up, that I also scaled up the size of the portals, and portals are not scalable. They're going to be the same size no matter what, so we got to go back to Blender real quick. We got to grab our portals, and we got to scale those down by 1/3. Yeah, scale them up by 1/3, or down by 1/3. Let's put it back at 1, and so we can bring these back to the ground, basically. There we go. Globals, we don't do that. And pull these back over. Cool. Make sure those are lined up decently. Too far on the ground. Same thing over here. Make sure these are good. We'll export one more time, check on it. And yeah, let's just try that again. Export the GLTF file. Go back to the world runner. And reload the scene. And here we go. So those should be, yeah, those are more correctly placed. And so on. I am personally not a huge fan of all of these like weird brush strokes going on. We might want to mess with those later, but for now we'll leave them as is. So we are getting some weird clipping every now and then. I don't know if you're seeing that in this world over here, where you like look through and you can see that exactly right here. This is a weird clipping thing where, and the reason that's happening is when we go and click on this mesh over here, its center point is in the center. And in order to get rid of this issue, we would have to separate all of these, turn off our collision meshes, separate all of these into individual meshes so that they have their own center points, basically. So I do something like this, we go into tab mode, and you'd have to select these faces, and we separate them based on selection. And then so on. So we just continue to do this until you have all separate objects. And then we're going to have to reset the center points of these meshes so that they are at their own, the center of their own geometry, basically. And that will alleviate some of these clipping issues. But it has to do with the alpha. And alpha transparency values are always tricky when you're building a nowhere space, just because you figure out which is going to be rendered first and what's going to be rendered in front of the other one. And that can get tricky on both the code side and on the world building side. So it looks like I still have a few more up here. Get these. 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 And it looks like maybe those are the last ones. So I go out of this, have them all selected, and I can go to set origin to geometry of each and every one of those. Save that, and make sure that's centered. And then let's export this one more time and reload it and see if we alleviated some of those issues. Cool. It looks like we created more clipping issues. It definitely is better in a way, but at the same time, we're gonna get clipping issues, and that's gonna be quite annoying. So one option is to just get rid of them and delete all of these weird little brush marks, which I may end up going with. But as you can see, this, what's happening is the center point of this big mesh is in the middle, over here, and the center point of all the other meshes are over here. So when your body is closer to this center point and this center point, it's going to render this one first over this one, and the opposite is true when you're closer to this center point. We could potentially start to alleviate some of these issues if we took this mesh and broke it up. So we'll try this one more time. If this doesn't work that well, then we'll end up just probably getting rid of those for this build. Separate each of these by selections, by their plane side, really. Go back, make sure I'm over here, have all of them selected, including the original. Set origin, set my geometry to, set origin to geometry. Now hopefully we have a little bit better luck here. So let's export one more time and see what happens. This is a struggle of world building and nowhere, but it's something that it's a caveat you got to figure out, especially when you're working with heavy levels of transparency. Yeah. Better, right? So until we get really close to the end, you still have some issues, but it's better. To say the least. We're getting there, making headway. You're still gonna have some clipping when you're in closer to these center points and you're closer to the middle of that center point. Yeah. I'm closer to these center points than I am to the center point of this wall, which makes sense. It's an issue, especially when you have overlapping transparent meshes. But for now, this is okay, and we will come back to that with a future troubleshooting video. But basically, in this video, we just went over how to bring your world into World Runner, check it out, and see what it's going to work like and how you're going to be able to run around before you actually send it over to us. And we mess with the scale. Things are a lot more spacious now. We can see if our teleporter is working by clicking on teleport to the egg, which it is. Our nav meshes are working well. Everything seems to be in pretty good working order. We have the banana, we have Club Tomato over here. Our billboarding is working properly and glowing. We'll add some animation to this world shortly. But it's looking pretty cool, I think. Something fun. Yeah, on to the next.